Hey guys, welcome back to the Lila Rose podcast. We're jumping in here for a spur of the moment YouTube live here because of the vice presidential debate last night. Thank you everybody who is tuning in right now. This is obviously a crucial breaking story about how the debate went down last night. This is a historic election. As you guys know, everyone is following this so closely. So much is on the line. And last night, JD Vance went head-to-head, toe-to-toe with Tim Walz in the first vice presidential debate, might be the only vice presidential debate of this election. So it was a huge debate. There was widely acclaimed, JD Vance's performance was widely acclaimed throughout media because he was in a strong performance. Tim Walz, a lot of people dunking on him for his performance, but people seem to be in agreement on both sides that some of JD Vance's weakest moments were on abortion. So we're going to unpack that part of the debate. There were several minutes of back and forth between Walz and Vance. We're going to watch it together. As you guys know, this is the focus of this podcast during our live segments that are election related, to unpack where the candidates are on life. Life is the most important human right. You can't enjoy any other human right without life. So life is the first human right, the right to not be killed, the right to exist. This is the most important human rights issue of our day because abortion is killing 3,000 children on average every single day in America. Legalized abortion. Abortion is the leading cause of death. It is the #1 cause of death in this country and globally. So how we and whether we protect life is the most important political issue. It doesn't matter how our economy is doing, how foreign affairs are doing, how our border is doing, if you can't even live, if you don't even have the right to exist. And tragically, horribly, 3,000 children each day are killed by legal abortion. Their rights, their right to exist being violated, their fundamental right to live. You can't enjoy any other right without life. So let's unpack this part of the debate with JD Vance and Tim Walz. It was, again, a lot of fireworks between them, but I will say, and we're going to unpack this more, I think there was a big missed opportunity on JD Vance's side. And Tim Walz, of course, was doubling down on his support of abortion. Tragically and unfortunately, you're going to see some of that doubling down, not for life, but even for abortion on JD Vance's side. We're going to unpack all of this here and watch it together. So let's start with the clip here from the debate. You're going to hear the moderator ask the question, and we're going to go into first comments from Walz and Vance on life.
Nora?
Thank you. Now to the issue of reproductive rights. Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion. Former President Trump said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on
Okay, let's pause here already. So I really actually appreciated the moderator doing this because it was an honest moment that the moderator had to question Tim Walz on his incredible and horrific support of abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy, even to the point of depriving abortion survivors, children who survive abortion attempts, of medical care. So immediately Tim Walz says, that's not true. He just pretends it's not true. But let's actually look at the law that Tim Walz supported that is doing what the moderator is saying that it did, which is supporting abortion through all 9 months of pregnancy to the point of leaving abortion survivors to die. So let's pull up this document here. You guys, we're going to pull it up here in the studio so you can see what I'm reading from. But this is the evidence that shows, the data that shows that the Minnesota statute in 2022, well, Tim Walz was governor and remains governor, obviously, to this day, Section 145-423, how he amended it in order to read that born-alive survivors after an abortion attempt would be deprived medical care. All right, so let me know if you guys can see this. Here we go, the Born Alive Infants Protection Act report. As you guys can see, this is up here. And this is from the Department of Health in the state of Minnesota. So we're reading, from their 2022 report, evaluating how abortions were done in the state. And this is from the state's own report that we're looking at here. So it says the 2015 Minnesota legislature enacted the Born Alive Infants Protection Act. It goes on to say that this text was amended because what Governor Walz did was amended the text in order to deprive, for the calendar year, it says, in order to deprive these children of life-saving medical care. It says for the calendar year of January 1, 2021 through December 31st, 2021, so in one calendar year, 5 abortion procedures resulted in a born alive infant. In one instance, fetal anomalies were reported resulting in death after delivery. No measures were taken to help the infant, and the infant did not survive. In instant 2, comfort care measures were provided. The infant did not survive. So just so you know here, comfort care measures could be as simple as putting a blanket over that baby instead of helping that baby breathe or giving that baby food. All right? According to whistleblower reports, where some of these born alive babies are left to die, the babies are left in maybe an operating room on a steel table, put a blanket over them, and they can take sometimes up to a day or 2 to die because they're just left there. It's obviously medical neglect. They're not meeting their basic needs. So the pro-abortion side would like to say, well, these babies were going to die anyways. If you refuse to feed them or help them breathe, yes, the babies will die, but they deserve assistance, basic medical assistance, especially when they've just been through a horrific attempt on their life that they survived, a late-term abortion. It says, in 2 instances, the infant was pre-viable. No measures were taken to preserve life, and the infant did not survive. I think it's also important to note here that babies have survived as early as 21 weeks, 5 days with medical care. And tragically, a lot of hospitals, especially if they're going to be doing an abortion on the baby, they want to kill the baby anyways, are not going to be providing that NICU care, that intensive neonatal intensive care for the child, because they're just going to leave the baby to die. So ultimately, 5 babies were not given medical care under Tim Walz's leadership, and they were deprived medical care under his leadership because they failed to protect babies who survive abortion attempts. This should not surprise us, though, because Tim Walz's record is in support of abortion through all 9 months for any reason. His own law in his state says that abortion can be permitted provided a doctor signs off on it. That would be the abortionist who's making thousands of dollars on the abortion, can be permitted and is elective for up to the woman's decision. If she decides it's best for herself and her health, and the abortionist decides, they can do that abortion. As you know, this idea of a woman's health can be used to justify any abortion, provided the woman wants it: economic health, relational health, emotional health. And again, as long as that abortionist signs off, which they do, that late-term abortion up to the 9th month of pregnancy is legal, is permitted. We've had undercover investigators at Live Action go into some of these late-term abortion clinics nationally and say, can I have an abortion? It's for my emotional health or my relational health. I want this abortion. They're 6 months, 7 months pregnant. And the abortion staff say, of course you can. We'll sign off on it. And in fact, in some of the clinics, they were saying and admitting to fabricating fetal anomalies. So they would lie on the paperwork and say that there were fetal defects in order to further justify the abortion on the books. But the point here stands that these babies, viable babies, are being killed legally by abortion in Tim Walz's own state under his watch, and he permits that, even to the point of leaving babies who survive abortion attempts to die. Think about that. Think about how horrific that is. This is the position of the Walz-Harris ticket. This is the position of the Democrat Party on abortion. And again, I'm grateful for the moderators in actually directly challenging Tim Walz with his position, which is so extreme that the vast majority of Americans are against abortion for any reason. Most Americans want abortion restrictions. You're not going to hear this in a lot of media reports. The media doesn't like to report on anything that makes pro-life look favorable. The media at large doesn't want to report on anything that indicates that people don't like abortion. A lot of media is captured by the pro-abortion left, and so they want to present abortion as something positive, so they're only going to tell sob stories to try to make abortion seem justifiable, talk about how people are so pro-choice. When you do the polling, the reality is the majority of Americans want abortion restrictions. The majority of Americans do not support the Democrats' platform on abortion, and they certainly do not support Tim Walz's position on abortion. So kudos to the moderator here for calling out Governor Walz on his abortion extremism here. Now, remember, any abortion on any life, they're all horrible. These are human beings. A child at 19 weeks has the same moral value as a child at 25 weeks. A child at 5 weeks has the same moral value as a child at 35 weeks. They're human beings. The only difference is their stage in development and how big they are. That's the difference. And all of them deserve their lives to be protected by law. That's what we're fighting for. So let's keep listening.
Everyone's mind. Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was that he put the judges in and overturned Roe versus Wade, 52 years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall.
Here. So repeatedly, the pro-abortion side is trotting out these very tragic stories of women who may be miscarrying or have complications and claiming that the reason they're not getting care is because of somehow pro-life laws. That is flat out false. When you examine these stories and the story that he just mentioned as an example, the reality is in the state of Texas, an early delivery of a baby can be legal if there is a medical emergency. And in that case, everything would be done to try to save the baby's life too, because that's real health care, seeing both the baby and the mother as patients. What has happened in some of these cases is women who are per se miscarrying, or we'll get to the case of Amber Thurman in a minute, women who may be miscarrying, they might go in and be in the process of a miscarriage, and then the doctors will prescribe a certain procedure or medication or say, let's wait and see. And then if there's any other complications in their miscarriage after the fact, they will blame, because they get involved with pro-abortion activists who are looking for these cases to try to undermine pro-life laws, they will blame the pro-life law. When the reality is the standard of care in that case is the same whether you're in California or Texas, a pro-abortion state versus a pro-life state. We've unpacked this before in the podcast, and it gets a little bit complicated, but the reality is there is not a single pro-life law in the books, not a single one, that prevents miscarriage care or that prevents intervening if there is a life-threatening medical emergency to do an early delivery where you're not trying to kill the baby in an abortion, but you're trying to save the life of both the baby and the mother. This is why in pro-life countries like Malta, the maternal mortality rate is extremely low compared to countries like the United States. Malta prohibits abortion, and they have a pro-life ethic in their healthcare to care for both the patients and the mother. That's the way to do healthcare. That was the Hippocratic Oath. Remember, do no harm. Do no harm. And actually, there was a part of that preamble, too, that had to do with not giving medication that would do an abortion. This has been in the practice of Western civilization of medicine. You go back to the early 2nd century, the Didache. Do not give medication to commit an abortion. Do not commit an abortion. That's killing. Healthcare professionals should be in the business of protecting life, saving life. And we can do that for mothers and children. Of course, that's not the vision of the Democratic Party, tragically, and increasingly some in the Republican Party. So let's keep watching Tim Walz's statement here.
Oh, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said, 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care. But look, this is not where, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have a...
So he's just spitting off all of these different pro-abortion talking points, but, you know, he's saying in my state of Minnesota, we enshrined Roe v. Wade. He's admitting here, without saying it directly, that they permit abortion through all 9 months in his state. It's absolutely horrific. And then he throws out some names. Amanda, he threw out the name Hadley. He's referring to Amanda Thurman, who we're going to talk about, and then he's also referring to, or he's referring to Hadley. He's referring to a rape survivor, a young girl who has been used by the Democrats in some of their ads to promote abortion. When you unpack these stories again, you find the misleading nature of this narrative. You find the lies that they're telling. In Hadley's story, when you unpack it, you find the horrible story of a young girl who was the victim of rape from her stepfather for years. She gets pregnant. The stepfather tries to drag her to an abortion clinic. She miscarries. She never had that abortion. And then she later on is now touting abortion as a solution to a rape or incest victim's plight. She never had one herself, and it was her abusive father who was going to make her have the abortion anyways. Think about that. The reality is killing a baby, even a baby conceived in rape, is never the solution to violence. You don't solve violence by adding more violence. And there's a reason they're not using a rape survivor who had an abortion as their poster child, because many rape survivors who have abortions regret them. And they felt in many ways they were told that this would help them heal. When the abortion didn't help them heal, it just hurt them more. And why would that be the case? Because the horror and the violence of a rape is not undone by an abortion. The horror and violence of a rape is only added to by the horror and the violence of an abortion. This is why here Tim Walz is referring to a comment that J.D. Vance has made in the past, which I thought was a good and strong comment from J.D. Vance in the past, that two wrongs don't make a right. When there's a horrible case of rape or incest and there's a pregnancy, there's a new life that's been conceived, the solution there is not to commit another violence and trauma of killing that baby. That baby is innocent. They are not responsible for the crime of his or her father. We got to keep the rapist accountable. It's very tragic to me that in these conversations, especially when they're being said by Democrat politicians and sometimes Republican politicians now, there is all of this emphasis on the way to handle rape by doing abortions, as opposed to the way to fight rape is to ensure there's justice for the victim and justice against the perpetrator, and that we have stronger penalties for those who commit violence instead of taking the penalty out on the innocent third party, which is this baby. There was a powerful story, by the way, in the New Yorker. Let's see if we can pull this up, actually, about my friend Rebecca Kiesling. I just want to share this with you guys really quick. I think it's powerful. Rebecca Kiesling is a dear friend of mine, attorney, a mother, very powerful woman, very beautiful soul. And she was conceived in a violent rape. She was actually, her mother was the victim of a violent rape. And so she goes around the country. And this woman, Rebecca Kiesling, my friend, has started this organization called Save the One. She's talking about the 1% of cases of abortion that are done because of rape, incest, or medical emergency. And she calls it Save the One because she's saying even in these 1% of cases where these horrible things happen, like rape or incest, there's still human beings and lives that deserve protection. And she says, Rebecca says, why should I be given the death penalty for the crime of my father? Because she was conceived in rape. Why should she get the death penalty? Did you know in America we don't even give the death penalty to rapists? It's actually against federal law to give that kind of a penalty to a rapist. And yet you have these politicians, even Donald Trump, and here Tim Walz, of course, arguing for abortion in cases of rape. We need to flip the narrative on this and fight back strongly against it, because it is a lie that abortion after rape will heal in any way a rape victim. And it is also a lie that abortion after rape will in any way help anyone, because all that it does is kill an innocent third party, that new and developing child. Okay, let's keep listening to Walz's next comments here.
Registry of pregnancies. It's going to make it more difficult, if not impossible, to get contraception and limit access, if not eliminate access to infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is...
quick. We're fact-checking Walz here left and right, but he's saying, well, they're opposing fertility treatments. They're opposing fertility treatments. This is code in now political speak for IVF, in vitro fertilization. There are many fertility treatments that don't involve creating new lives and multiple new lives in a petri dish, then freezing many of them indefinitely, then destroying some of them, then donating some of them for human experimentation. The tragic cases that many people aren't aware of is that IVF has led to 1 million frozen embryos. These aren't just the building blocks for life. These are the actual individual new human lives that are indefinitely frozen right now because of the IVF industry. And IVF can be very painful and difficult for the mother, for the woman. It can lead to the miscarriages and abortions of up to 93% of the babies created via IVF. It is highly dangerous for the babies. It is very painful for the mother, and it's highly expensive. It's $30,000 to $60,000 to achieve a live birth via IVF. What we should be promoting is restorative approaches to fertility treatments. But that's never talked about by Tim Walz or even by, unfortunately, Donald Trump or J.D. Vance these days. I wonder why. I'm trying to get the information out there, and we've been passing the information on to the campaigns that there are other ways, ethical ways, to achieve a baby and do it via using restorative methods to work with the health, improving the health of the mother and the father to treat infertility. We do not need to use the unethical IVF industry to do this. And we're going to keep working on this, but I think one of the reasons the IVF industry is so powerful in politics is because you're talking about billions of dollars. It's a very big industry, just like complaints are made about big pharma having all of this control over the Food and Drug Administration and all of this control, during, you could talk about vaccines, you can talk about all of the different things that people are concerned about where big business interests take over what's best for the person. That is absolutely what's happening with infertility in this country. But no one's talking about it on the national stage yet because it's easier and more popular with your potentially big pharma donors or big IVF donors just to go the route of we're going to pay for IVF, which is unfortunately what President Trump has come out in support of, former President Trump, that he would make it tax funded and mandated to fund IVF. So anyways, obviously Walz is making an accusation here that doesn't actually amount to anything because President Donald Trump has supported IVF. But the reality here is we should be pursuing restorative approaches to fertility that are ethical, that can actually achieve the same amount of live births. I mean, the beautiful thing about restorative approaches to infertility is it can be as successful as IVF without the ethical issues. And so I want to encourage you guys to go check out a lot of the episodes I've done recently on this, particularly with Dr. Lauren Rubal, one of my dear friends. She was a former IVF doctor. She actually used to practice IVF. Now she does restorative healthcare to treat infertility and has amazing success. So check out those episodes. Well, let's keep listening.
Well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right. We have seen maternal mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for.
You can pause it here. So this is another false talking point, another lie from Tim Walz, which is to say that, well, there's poor maternal mortality rates in Texas, and that's because of pro-life laws. There is zero evidence for this. He doesn't provide any evidence because there isn't any evidence. Maternal mortality rates in Texas seem to have made a decline in the last few years, but many can say that's due to COVID and due to the risk of mothers who are pregnant with COVID. The other part of that too is the reality that in medical coding, when it comes to pregnancy and miscarriage, many times if a woman is actually, her life is endangered because of abortion, the medical coding, meaning an abortion gone wrong, like the case of Amber Thurman, or the case of, say, Tanya Reeves, who was killed in a Planned Parenthood in Chicago in 2012, their cases, instead of being coded as abortion is what hurt them or killed them, their cases will be coded as pregnancy complications killed them. So what you see is this inflation of medical coding that indicates that it's actually just pregnancy that is dangerous when it actually was the abortion that is dangerous. Of course, none of this is being shared by Tim Walz. It would undercut his whole point that abortion is somehow good, but he's misleading the viewers here, the electorate here, in how he's presenting. And keep listening.
For a reason. We trust women. We trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue.
Okay, let's pause this here. I want to just preface this here because obviously I was watching this last night and live tweeting it. If you guys are online watching my Twitter feed or on Twitter yourselves, you will have seen her on X. Listen, J.D. Vance had a great opportunity here. He could have knocked it out of the park. And what you're going to see, we're going to comment on what he did. But and I get it. A lot of people, they want to cheer for the not Harris-Walz team because Harris and Walz on abortion are despicable. They support abortion through all 9 months for any reason. But I have to remind us that the Republican Party's plank on this for the last 4 decades has been 100% pro-life. And just a few months ago, Trump, under his influence, ultimately forced the delegates to change the Republican Party plank to permit some abortion, to say that the states can permit abortion, adding in IVF, adding in birth control. They also removed traditional marriage from the party. And so there's this new narrative, this new talking point that some Republicans, not all, but some Republicans are now touting on abortion. They're basically trying to somehow make peace with some of the pro-abortion side. And I want to just start by saying here, pro-abortion voters are already voting for Kamala and for Tim, for Walz and for Harris. Pro-abortion voters are already going to back the Harris-Walz ticket. When Vance and Trump try to throw pro-life movement under the bus, say that they support some abortion, say that they're for abortion, try to soften their position on abortion like they just forced the RNC to soften the platform on life, they're not winning moderates. They're not winning anyone. And people say, well, they're doing this because we lost in the 2020 election because of life. And there's this whole narrative that when pro-life is stated, then it's a losing issue. And that's simply false. The reality is, in the 2020 midterm, there were many passionately pro-life candidates that won, some of them in landslides, their elections. An example of this, of course, would be Governor Ron DeSantis in a purple state, won in a landslide, and he was strong on life. He wasn't backing down, saying he supports, some states to do abortion, and Texas and Florida, he wants them to have abortions in Florida. He was saying that he was strongly pro-life. The reality is the strongly pro-life message is a winning message if you're willing to speak it, if you're willing to call abortion what it is. Abortion is the dismemberment, it's the lethal injection, it's the starving to death via abortion pills of a new human life, and killing a baby. Call abortion what it is. It's killing a baby. Killing a baby is never the solution to any problem. We have to protect our sons and daughters. We have to protect our children. That can be such a winning message. We have to reject the abortion extremism of the left, of the Democrats. That's what I was waiting to hear, or hoping to hear from J.D. Vance. And by the way, that kind of language is what helped J.D. Vance get his seat in the Senate. He used to say very strongly pro-life things. He got a 100% pro-life record from some pro-life group because he was passionately pro-life. But now, in just the last few weeks, a couple months since becoming the pick for VP, he's done a 180 on life. And so you're going to see some of that here.
Of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a...
Let's pause it here. So what is so sad about what J.D. Vance is doing here is because the one story he tells, the one story he chooses to tell, he's supposed to be the pro-life candidate, is about a woman that had an abortion that feels like that abortion helped her, right? Of course, he didn't tell the thousands and even millions of stories he could have told about the women who regret their abortions bitterly. I've interviewed probably over 1,000 now, talked to over 1,000 now in the last decade about women who are deeply wounded by their abortions. Those women and their stories, they never make media headlines. They're not allowed to really tell their stories in polite society because the prevailing narrative, the narrative of the pro-abortion side and Planned Parenthood, is that abortion is good for you. It's great. It's empowering. Have your abortion. And so he's using the story of his friend who, for whatever reason in her trauma, she was in an abusive relationship, in her memory and recollection of that time in her life is saying, well, it's good I had that abortion. Maybe talk to her in another 10 or 20 years when the anniversaries roll by again of when that baby would have had their birthday, when that baby would have been born. Abuse, struggles, inconveniences, disabilities, none of these are justifications for taking an innocent human life. We are never better off by killing our babies. We are never better off by killing our children. Abortion wounds, it never liberates. The message here could have been so strong from J.D. Vance to say, listen, there are millions of women whose voices aren't heard, who regret the pain of their abortions, who regret it. We need to defend life. We need to protect human beings. Life begins at fertilization. These are human lives. Science is clear on this. Abortion is the lethal, dismemberment, the starving to death. Abortion is the lethal injections in the later term of human beings, of innocent children. These are our children. We got to defend them. And the Democrats want to kill them through all 9 months. It is disgusting and unacceptable. That was like the old JD, right? This new JD, and you can kind of tell he kind of loses his energy here. He gets very, apologetic. He's kind of, beating himself up in a way. I have inside knowledge that the people advising JD right now, they're not pro-life. They're people that don't care about this issue, that themselves support abortion. And so they want to persuade JD and Trump, and I think Trump himself is in support of abortion. He himself is not personally pro-life. And they want to persuade them that you gotta do this. The reality is JD Vance is not winning any voters by going to the left on abortion. He's only losing his own base. He's losing his opportunity to differentiate himself from the radical extremism of the pro-abortion side. I believe it's immoral what they're doing here to throw babies under the bus. And this might cost them the election. I hear from thousands of people who are watching this play out. The base, the former passionate pro-life base who's going to say, I want to vote for the candidate that's going to be a fighter for life. Remember that President Trump spoke at the March for Life? JD Vance was the 100% pro-life senator. If we had those candidates again, I think the base would be so excited, so galvanized, so ready to get out the vote. But I talk to people every day, multiple people who express how upset they are at this leftward turn that Vance and Trump are making and this doubling down on their support of abortions that they are doing. And I think it is a huge mistake. Some people are saying, Lila, you're suppressing the vote by talking like this, by saying this. The only people suppressing their own vote right now are the miscalculations, the potentially fatal miscalculations that Vance and Trump are making to moderate, to go to the left on abortion. Again, they are not winning any new votes this way. They only stand to lose them. And I've been warning them again and again that if you keep going this route, it's going to hurt you on election day. And unfortunately, the performance we saw, probably because of the pro-abortion consultants that they have, was, I believe, damaging to their campaign in this part of the debate. Again, Vance was strong on so many other issues, according to a lot of the base. But in this part, he had some of his weakest moments. All right, let's keep listening.
Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions.
Okay, so pause here. I mean, here, it is just crazy to me. Here, Vance is saying, let California vote to have abortion through all 9 months. Let like the federal law there's no role that they have. Let them basically permit the killing of babies through all 9 months. And then he's going to get to, there's no federal action here. We're not going to stop it. We're not going to stop it when a state like California or Tim Walz's state is going to commit abortion through all 9 months. Imagine if the abolitionists during the time of slavery and the politicians who were claiming to be for abolition said, actually, no, let the states do their slavery thing. Let them do it. It's not a big deal. Let them do it. It's their right. As opposed to, no, everyone has the right to be free. Everyone has the right to not be enslaved. The pro-life position of everyone has the right to life is not some opinion. It's a constitutional right that we all have. Our own Constitution under the 14th Amendment specifically states equal protection for all persons and says that no state has the right to deprive life of any person without due process. What's happening in California is unconstitutional. They're depriving children of their right to live without due process. This could have been a powerful moment for JD Vance to speak up for those that are the most vulnerable, and unfortunately, he chose a different path. Let's keep listening.
individual states make their abortion policy. And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked, and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance, had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to...
With her health rapidly declining, and they were trying to save her life, and they couldn't because of sepsis, because of the abortion pill, which killed her twin babies and then killed her. This would have been a great opportunity for JD to just come out swinging against Walz's lies. He's lying here, bald-faced lies on a national debate stage. And that would have been powerful, powerful moment where he could have seized the moral high ground. Instead, he goes down this path of saying, well, I actually don't know that I do support abortion bans. In fact, that's not exactly what I said. And maybe I would support a little bit of one, maybe on some age requirements or, the baby, a certain age would the baby be, and then I would prohibit abortion. I mean, he's kind of fumbling here because he's on the defensive. You see, when you go on the defensive, like JD Vance unfortunately is doing here, you lose the moral high ground, you lose the plot, and I think people can smell it, that there's weakness here, and it's like blood in the water. And so the Democrats, who should have the moral low ground, I mean, it's so evil what is being supported by Tim Walz. He's lying about Amber Thurman. He supports abortion through all 9 months. He supports allowing born-alive babies to die. The guy is as radical as you can get on abortion. And JD Vance could have come out swinging in this moment. Instead, he's on the defensive at a moment when he could have been the most strongly on the offensive. And this is what I'm seeing again and again from, unfortunately, former President Trump and JD Vance and some Republicans, not all again, who are buying this lie that they have to moderate on abortion. Moderating on abortion like this is not going to make you win. It's actually going to hurt your ability to persuade people, and it's going to really make your base upset because you're not being honest. So that's what we're seeing here. And again, a disappointing moment. I was on X, and everyone's kind of screaming on X like, debunk the Amber Thurman lie. Come on, JD Vance. Like, she was killed because of abortion, not because of a pro-life law. In fact, if abortion pills had been illegal and they weren't on the market, Amber would probably be alive today and her twins would be alive. But it was because of abortion that she and her twins died. That's what would have been a powerful response from Vance, but we didn't see here. Let's keep listening.
In place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed
hopes that there won't be a federal pro-life law. I mean, it's just a complete tragedy. This 180 turn that has been taken. It used to be, yes, of course there's a constitutional right to life. Of course we have to protect children. But now the media is just, there's swarms and swarms of lies that are being told by, unfortunately, Walz and others. And the Republican response, instead of saying, this is a lie, like, we're going to fight for the truth here and fight for life, these are lies that are fear-mongering women, the response from some Republicans here, and again, because of pro-abortion consultants, is to say, well, you're right, we're gonna moderate on this, you can have some abortions. I want to go to next, the debate obviously went on, but I want to go next to President Trump's comments after the debate and talk about that, because I think it's really important. So after the debate was concluded, President Trump is live on X and he's making this statement. So I'm going to read it here. It was former President Donald Trump. He says, everyone knows, and it's in all caps on Twitter, on X, and I think it was on Truth Social too. He says, everyone knows I would not support a federal abortion ban under any circumstances. That is signaling I wouldn't even ban abortion in the late term at the federal level. Let California do their thing. I mean, this is as left-leaning as you can get to say I don't want any abortion restrictions. That's where President Trump is. He continues, I would not support a federal abortion ban under any circumstances and would in fact veto it. So even if Republicans did this incredible job in the House and the Senate of getting a pro-life law to the president. He's saying he would veto it. He goes on. I mean, this is like the pro-abortion person's dream. They're probably like jumping out of the seats, like maybe I should vote for Donald Trump, the pro-aborts. They're not going to do that, obviously, because Kamala is 100% for them already. But Donald Trump is sounding a lot like Kamala here. He goes on to say, I would in fact veto it because it is up to the states to decide based on the will of their voters. Like Ronald Reagan before me, I fully support the 3 exceptions for rape, incest, and the life of the mother. I do not support the Democrats' radical position of late-term abortion. Well, Trump does at the federal level, he's saying. He would not prohibit it. As an example, in the 7th, 8th, or 9th month, in case there's any question, the possibility of execution of the baby after birth. Thank you for your attention to this matter. So I want to just address this here. He's done this multiple times, President Trump, where he talks about Ronald Reagan. And he says that he thinks Ronald Reagan's exceptions were this great thing, and he wants to have exceptions like Ronald Reagan. Did you know that Ronald Reagan actually regrets those exceptions? These are exceptions that he's talking about when Ronald Reagan was the governor in the state of California. And California used to be a pro-life state back in the day. And it was a Republican governor who created exceptions in their pro-life law to permit abortion in the cases of rape, incest, and the life health of the mother. And Ronald Reagan himself, we're going to pull up this article if we can. Ronald Reagan himself later on would say that it was him permitting these exceptions to abortion that opened the floodgates to abortion. And it's a very powerful, this is an article from the New York Times. What year is this on here? If you guys can see it, this was from 1976. So this is in just a few years after he made the decision as governor to legalize abortion when Ronald Reagan was governor of California. And it talks about how he regrets being in support of these exceptions because he realized that the support of exceptions actually opened the floodgates to abortion. And this is the fact. Let's go down the logical rabbit trail here of why this is. The reality is, if you say it's okay to kill a baby if the baby's father is abusive, or you say it's okay to kill a baby because of some condition that the mother says she has, maybe an emotional health condition or some other condition, you can rationalize most abortions. You are now undercutting the case for life. You're undercutting the idea of an inviolable, you cannot violate the right to life. And you're saying, well, yeah, in some cases you can kill an innocent person if they're enough of a burden or enough of a psychological burden on their mother. In the case of rape or incest, they're enough of a psychological burden you can kill. Or in the case of some sort of health issue the mother may have, they're enough of a physical or emotional burden, so you can kill. And Ronald Reagan was admitting that actually because of these exceptions that he permitted, I mean, he didn't legalize abortion through all 9 months for any reason on paper in California. But what happened when he wrote in the rape, incest, and life health of the mother exceptions was that now the doctors, these abortionists, could sign off on any abortion, provided the woman wanted it, using these exceptions. And so this is the state of America today. The state of America today is we are being inconsistent logically, and we're not being humane to either the mother or the child by resorting to violence, saying that the violence of abortion is somehow the solution to any number of issues. And that ideology, that view of abortion in some cases is good, only leads to the crisis we have today, which is abortion effectively on demand, 3,000 lives taken every day by abortion. And so when Donald Trump uses Ronald Reagan as some sort of justification for his exceptions, when Ronald Reagan regretted his own actions, I think that's dishonest. He's not telling the whole story there, and he's trying to basically use the good name of Ronald Reagan to ingratiate himself with Republican voters to say, well, listen, this is what Ronald Reagan did. Well, Ronald Reagan regretted the way he governed in California on abortion. And I believe if J.D. Vance looks back on this maybe a decade from now, on this really downward spiral that the Trump-Vance ticket is operating on, is going on, he may regret his actions here too. This position of saying, yes, some abortions are fine. Sometimes killing the baby is fine. We're going to do that. It's not, let the states do what they want. This is not the just or loving decision or position for the Trump-Vance ticket to take. And unfortunately, this is what we see them doubling down on. So you guys are probably wondering, we're going to wrap here in a moment, but what can we do? Listen, it's tragic what's happening. And again, I know I'm in conversation with so many people who are upset about what's happening. The IVF mandate, the softening on traditional marriage, the support for some abortions via the abortion pill, the insistence that, let California do what they want. We won't lift a finger at the federal level. This is not a winning message for the base. And the political calculation that I believe they're making is a bad one, and it's also the wrong thing to do. So I think increasingly the campaign needs to hear from us, from voters. Make your voices loud and clear. Stop doing this. This is not okay. Stop throwing the right to life under the bus. These are human beings. They're human lives that are at stake. And women, the cause of women is not served by embracing the narrative that killing our babies is the path to empowerment. We can and we must do better for our children and for women. That is and must be our position. And I believe that message, when it's shared, when we tell the stories of Rebecca Kiesling, when we talk about who was conceived and raped, when we talk about the violence of what abortion actually is, when we talk about the beauty of a developing human life, that little boy or girl with their heart beating at just 3.5 weeks, that sound of that beautiful heartbeat and how we have to protect that heartbeat, I believe that is a powerful and winning message. All right, we're going to close in prayer here, guys, as we have done on a lot of these lives, because this is heavy stuff and a lot is at stake here. We've been doing a decade of the Chaplet of Divine Mercy, so it looks like Harris is on it. He already has this up here. So this is the Chaplet of Divine Mercy prayer. We've been doing 1 decade of the Divine Mercy prayer. So we're going to start in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. This is to pray for mercy on our country and for the protection of all children. And we'll start with the Eternal Father and then the 10 shorter prayers. Eternal Father, I offer you the body and blood, soul and divinity of your dearly beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, in atonement for our sins and those of the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. For the sake of his sorrowful passion, have mercy on us and on the whole world. All right, guys, thank you so much for praying with me, for listening in. We will see you all next time. Thanks for joining in on the chat on this special YouTube live of the Lila Rose podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. If you are watching right now on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. You ring the notification bell. And if you're listening on podcast app later, make sure you are subscribed to the show and leave us a review. The reviews and the comments on the reviews help the podcast reach more people. Leave us 5 stars. That will help the podcast reach more people. Thanks so much, guys, and we will see you next time.